Hey guys, what's up? So, I gotta admit, I don't know as much as I thought I knew when it came to cheap guitars. And in fact, now I don't even know what to think when it comes to certain brands and what my expectations should even be. So, let's talk about that and check out this Donner guitar. Alright, guys, so straight up, this guitar was sent to me by Donner, and it's their Verisonic Strat looking thing. They reached out to me about some pedals, and I was like, oh, sure, I'll check out some pedals. And they were like, hey, how about you also look at this guitar and you can use it too? And I was like, okay. And really, what happened was they sent me the link to this guitar. And when I opened it, I was like, oh, that's not really my style. That doesn't look like a heavy metal guitar. And it's not, let's be honest. But what it is a pretty faithful, or at least aesthetically faithful, like copy of what is an Ibanez AZ2204 or 2204, which is a Prestige. And there's even a metallic blue color just like this that they make in the Ibanez. And I'm talking, the only thing that's really different aesthetically between that Ibanez and this is that this has a silver covered pickup and the Ibanez doesn't. When you look at the headstock, even, the headstock shape is almost reminiscent of the Ibanez headstock. It has the same control layout in terms of volume, tone. There's a mini toggle switch here, and then there's a 5-way selector switch. So it is trying to be that guitar, even with the input or the output jack in the same spot. The bottom line is this guitar has way more features than you would expect on what you would call an entry-level or budget guitar. I know budget guitars are definitely coming up in the world, and you have brands like Firefly, Harley Benton. You have a lot of brands that are hovering around that $200 to $500 range. So when I got this guitar, I was not expecting a whole lot. I knew on paper that there was a lot of interesting things about this guitar, but I was still expecting to get something that was going to be roughly unplayable without some real work. And that's not what I found. What I found was a pretty well set up, out of the box, easy to kind of tune up, intonate, play. And I was just surprised by how not hard it was to get this thing just to be playable out of the box. So let's just go over some of the things that are kind of interesting about this particular model. This is the DST550. It's kind of Donner's mid to upper tier echelon of this particular style of guitar. It's still touted as like an entry level, mainly because of the price range. I mean, I think Donner, they're pretty clear about, the stuff that they make is kind of more budget friendly, entry level, but they do kind of wade into the realm of potentially playable and stage worthy. And this is kind of where that guitar sits. It's kind of in that like, not quite a beginner guitar and not quite a professional level, really fine-tuned instrument. This thing kind of hovers in that middle ground. I say that mostly because there's some things on here that you wouldn't expect on a beginner instrument. So first up, we have this roasted maple neck. Now, for a long time, roasted maple was kind of this higher-end kind of feature that guitars employed on some of the models, some of the higher-end brands. It just happened to be a little bit of a boutique kind of feature on a guitar, but then it started to become way more prevalent on production models. And then you have cheaper brands like Firefly or Harley Benton, and now Donner, with the roasted maple. It's almost like it's almost ubiquitous. And it's cool because it is a heat treated maple, so it is a bit more solid, more stable, less prone to warping, and less prone to temperature fluctuations. But it's worth noting that the maple on this doesn't look to be super, super high-end maple, but it's a roasted maple neck. It seems pretty solid, and the finish on the neck is like a satin finish, and it's really well done. The finish on here is actually pretty nice. There's no cracks, there's no scuffs, there's no weird hazy spots. The sparkle, it's really even. There's no like little ripples from where the the primer's coming through the paint and into the clear coat. Everything just looks decent. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this guitar, and this is kind of a double-edged sword in my opinion, is the 2-point tremolo here. So a tremolo on a guitar that is meant to be more entry-level or potentially more beginner-friendly is not my recommendation. I don't think tremolos really belong on guitars that are meant for somebody who's just learning to play. It's just an extra layer of learning and an extra layer of difficulty to deal with when you have a tremolo. I find a 2-point tremolo system to be a much more comfortable and easier to kind of deal with system than some of those, those old vintage style Strat tremolos. The other thing that's cool about this, and this is a carryover from that Ibanez Prestige design, is the access channels here. So you can actually screw the claw that the springs are attached to for the tremolo in without removing this back plate, which is really, really nice. Cool feature to have. And the other thing about this tremolo, from a design perspective, an aesthetic thing, if I can catch it in the light, these saddles, they're more like a satin finished saddle. They're not like that really high gloss chrome. They're more of like a satin finish. I think that's a really cool design choice. It makes the guitar look a little bit more high-end classy. Another thing that was totally unexpected is the locking tuners. There are some budget brands that have locking tuners that are kind of iffy. I would say that Spira that I did a couple weeks ago, they're just okay. If you've ever had like a cheap tuner and you know what happens when you try to tune something and you get that all of a sudden it just kind of breaks away and slips down like a whole half turn without doing anything to the pitch, I think you know what I'm talking about. I think if you're going to put locking tuners on a guitar and call it a premium feature, they should be locking tuners that actually are better than a standard tuner would be otherwise. Now, with all that cool stuff, there are some caveats here. There are some things that are kind of rough on the guitar too, and it's in the places that you would expect, like the fretwork. The fretwork on here, for the most part, pretty good in terms of height. I went through and I checked everything. There's one obviously high fret, and it's the 10th fret here, and it's just one of those things that once you get up there, you can hear it. And it is what it is. It's a cheap guitar. I've had more expensive guitars have fret issues as well that I had to tamp down. The fret ends, they're just a hair sharp. Just enough, especially on the higher frets, to feel them. They're not going to cut you up. They're not going to do any kind of damage, but they do need a little bit of a dressing to be properly done. And then there's the electronics. So unlike the Prestige, which has Seymour Duncan pickups, these are not that. These are ceramic. They're not Alnico. They're ceramic across the board. I think they call them Thunder Forge or some sort of kind of cool name like that. And with a name like that, you'd expect them to be a little bit more high output, but they're not. They're pretty vintage. And we're going to get into what this sounds like and what the different voicing features are in here, because there are 7 voices. And I'm going to run it through this 5150 Iconic that I have here, because I think it does pretty much the whole suite of clean, crunch, and high gain tones in one small combo. I have a Eminence Swamp Thing in here. I have it mic'd up with an SM57, and we'll go through kind of what this sounds like through this amp, and I'll leave you with some thoughts about cheap guitars, how this has kind of reoriented my perspective on where the threshold is for what is worth buying, and and we'll get into it. Okay, so I'm just on the clean green channel here. I'm on the bridge pickup with a humbucker, fully engaged. And really what's going on with this particular wiring scheme here is it's a 5-way switch, traditional, all the way to the right you have the humbucker, and then position 2 is a series or a parallel split with the humbucker and the middle pickup engaged, and then middle position is just the middle pickup. And then cool enough, you get to position 4, like my favorite position for clean tones, and you get the parallel split between these two single coils, and they are humbucking when you're in this position. And then all the way to the left is the neck single coil. Now you're like, well, what does this this little mini toggle do? Well, unlike the Prestige, all this does is actually split the coil on the humbucker, nothing else. Anyway, so I'm on the humbucker, and here's my clean tone just running through straight. And you can hear it's pretty spanky. It's got a pretty nice, clear tone. It's not muddy, it's not tinny either. If I split the coil, it's not the greatest split coil tone, I'll say. It basically just sounds like a lower output. But what it kind of lacks is that that real clear, chimey tone. It sounds better as a humbucker, I would say. And then when you go to position 2 and you add in that parallel middle pickup, now you're getting more into the realm of kind of that scooped, kind of Fender-y classics, single coil tone. If I go ahead and I split the coil too, not a big difference. Maybe a little bit more mid-range, a little bit more bottom end when you have it in humbucking mode. To be honest, not my favorite tone on this guitar. You go into the middle position and you get your standard middle pickup. I find that the bottom end on these pickups to be a little bit thin. If I add in a compressor to kind of fatten it up a little bit. Compression pedal just kind of evens out some of that that dynamic between that really forward mid sound you get out of the strings in the middle and then that low end. Now, if you go to my favorite position, which is the 4th position, humbucking, so there's no buzz, you get that really classic, just Dire Straits kind of tone. Oh, still have the compressor on. Turn the compressor off. Yeah, I mean, that parallel dual single coil thing is just so nice. For cleans, and even for some grit we'll get into, it can't be beat. And then the neck pickup, very classic. Less scooped, a little more mid-forward, good chime. Add the compressor back on. Just very nice. Let me go back to the humbucker real quick. Now if I add in a little bit of distortion with the, or a little bit of overdrive with my Lichtlaerm Aquaria here, it's like a clone circuit, you get a decent amount of just kind of Britishy grit. usually engage the EQ circuit on the pedal to give it a little bit of a softer mid-range. A little bit more resonance. Yeah, not bad. If you move over to the fourth position, my favorite, with a little bit of grit. Add the compressor. I can add a little bit more gain on the channel itself. Roll back the tone knob a little bit just to soften it. Wrong chord. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to some high gain tones, just to see if this thing can do the metal, see if it can do the trunk. And I'm going to keep it on the bridge pickup with the humbucker engaged. There's a built-in noise gate on the amp, but it's kind of in the loop in a sense. I don't have a noise gate up front, so you're going to hear some noise floor. Alright, so I got the red channel on, it's got the burn feature on, it's fully ready for high gain, so let's see what we get. Okay, so it can do the heavy metal chuggy thing. The pickup is a little underwound. It's a little kind of thuddy in the mids. It kind of lacks that tight bottom end that an active pickup obviously would give you, or even like a better wound passive. I'll give it like a C plus for the metal stuff. It does pretty well. I think also once I get that high fret kind of figured out on here and get it to where I can get this action just a little bit lower for my taste, it will be more metal friendly. But let's be honest, this isn't a metal guitar. This is an all-arounder kind of thing that you could definitely make this into a mod platform. You could definitely give this to somebody who's learning, as long as you maintain the bridge properly and keep it set up. A beginner would have no problem using this as long as it was set up properly. Yeah, this bridge is pretty stable. Beyond that, if you're just somebody who's, a weekend warrior who just needs a backup guitar, just any guitar that is kind of fun to play with, especially if you have a proclivity for modifying stuff, I would say this would be definitely worth getting. I got to be honest, Donner was the last guitar choice that I ever thought about even bringing to the channel or even reaching out to. I know they do a lot of other stuff music-wise. The pedals were intriguing, and I'll get into those in a different video. And I'm going to use this guitar in that video too. But I want to know from you guys, do you think I should keep a hold of this guitar? I mean, I have it, so I don't have to give it back, but I also know kids. I have kids, and I know people with kids, and this would be a good gift for a kid. But should I keep hold of this and kind of do some funky modifications to it and try to feature it as a budget option on the channel? You guys let me know in the comments. I gotta say, like I alluded to before, my threshold of what I expect from a budget guitar has greatly moved up. I think if a company like Donner can put out something like this, this really is a shot across the bow to any other established brand like, Schecter, LTD, all the legacy brands, or all the big box brands. You make stuff that is sometimes not as good as this. Be aware that these options exist, and I'm actually pleasantly impressed with what this is. So that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully I didn't ramble for too much. So yeah, just see you guys later.